And Dr. Alan Lipman, a criminal psychologist and executive director of the Center for the Study of Violence, is with me now. Dr. Lipman, we've come to rely on you a lot in these terrible circumstances as someone who can provide us some insight into the criminal mind. Many folks want to believe this is a story about any number of things, and it might be, gun control, what have you. But at the beginning, don't we have to start with what made the shooter want to kill?
Well, let's think about this, and it is true that, again, you and I join in a tragic situation, and our hearts, of course, go out to those families in Connecticut and every one of us across the nation. But now look, the fact is that as we saw in Aurora, Colorado with Holmes, as we saw in Virginia Tech with Cho, as we saw with Loeffner in Tucson, Arizona, in every single one of these cases, and in the U.S. Secret Service study that looked at over 20 years of these episodes, before virtually every single one, there was a undiagnosed or insufficiently treated mental illness. And again, we see at the prime age, late teens or early 20s, when a person erupts into psychosis. This is what we're seeing again with Adam Lanza. You just reported, one of your reporters was noting that Nancy Lanza was having increasing trouble with Adam over these last couple of years. This is how it works. The person first shows a pattern of abnormal social behavior. That is a key sign of the preceding signs of schizophrenia. Then they become more and more difficult, and then they're late teens or early 20s, they break into psychosis. So it's quite likely, although we don't know for certain, that that is the case as in all of these other shootings that we have seen that has happened here. Now, Megan, it is the case that if you have someone, as with Holmes, as with Loeffner, and as appears to be the case with Lanza, with Cho and so forth, going all the way back to Columbine, that if you have someone who is filled with rage, filled with delusions, filled with vengeance, and they can simply lay their hands on something that will allow that vengeance to be quickly acted upon rather than delayed, that is a very powerful combination. We need to begin a national dialogue in which we teach people how to identify the signs of mental illness that we have been so afraid to look at. In every one of these incidents beforehand, I've heard over the years since my early days at Yale, how can this happen? I can't believe that this has happened. How can we explain it? We know why. What we need to be able to do is to teach people, parents, educators, citizens, how to identify the signs of this mental illness in their children. And, Megan, how to intervene. This is something we can teach and we can do.
Well, that's the question I have for you. I mean, quite frankly, I'm sure you feel the same. I'm getting sick of you and I having this conversation. And
me too. Enough of this, for God's sake.
And every time you point out that, and you've said this before, long before we ever knew the name Adam Lanza, that's the age. The late teens, early 20s is when you have the first psychotic break. And we've seen it many times, and we don't know whether that's what happened here, but clearly something was very wrong with Adam Lanza.
Do you want to know what the problem is?
Yeah,
why we keep having this conversation again and again? Well, here's what I believe, and I've been looking at this now for over 20 years. There are two reasons, okay? The first, we as a nation need to understand that mental illness should not be stigmatized, and it is not an excuse. These people are responsible for their actions. But if we don't look at that cause, if we don't learn to see it, understand it, see the signs, and learn how to intervene, as parents, educators, friends, citizens of this nation, we will see this cycle repeat again and again. We need to look at it, to get over our own discomfort, to identify the signs, and to be able to learn to intervene. And secondly, if we know that we have a child who is violent, who is out of control, who is in fact suffering from these kinds of symptoms. We need to take them to a hospital, to a clinic, to a doctor like myself, and not leave them in the presence of something
I've got
that can
60
create
seconds of the hard
tremendous
break.
harm.
Listen, I got 60 seconds
for
of the
all
hard
of
break,
us.
but I have to get this in. Is there a place for them in this system? I mean, do we commit them? Is it just the criminal justice system?
Is there
a
a place
for people who haven't committed a crime, but who don't necessarily warrant commitment?
Megan, here is the place. The place is in our own minds as members of this community to identify the signs so that we can take them to the places where we can give them the treatment that we already have. There's not a lack of available treatments. There's a lack of available sight. And we need to, as a nation, make it a national priority to identify the signs of mental illness beforehand so that we can prevent these tragedies, prevent this horrific grief in our nation. We know the reasons. We need to open our eyes, learn the signs, and take the actions to intervene.
Dr. Lipman, we'll be seeing more of you in the coming days because we need to delve deeper into this, and in particular those signs to
agree.
watch out for. Thank you.